2022 at 6 p.m. We are at the District Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the land of the Minnewacan Dakota people. Minnewacan means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. Our first item on the agenda is our roll call. Dana.
Eric Tessmer.
Here.
Louise Hines.
Here.
Katie Schwartz.
Here.
Melinda Doles.
Here.
Simi Petnaik.
Here.
Pat Driscoll is absent. Sharon Van Leer.
Here. Next, please rise for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we have 3.0, and that is the approval of our agenda. Can I get a motion to approve an amended agenda, adding action item 7.4, which is the lease extensions with the City of Woodbury, and 7.5, the MOU with the City of Woodbury concerning Central Park? Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Simi and second by Louise. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Next on our agenda is 4.0, and that's comments to the board. However, tonight we haven't had no one sign up, so we'll move on to 5.0, which is our consent agenda items, and that is Katie.
All consent agenda items are considered routine and non-controversial by the school board and will be approved by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. Prior to the board meeting, board members have had the opportunity to review each item and may request that any item be moved to an action item for individual consideration. This has not happened this evening, so I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Motion carries.
Next is 6.0, information items. 6.1 is our financial update, and that will be given this evening by our Director of Finance and Operations, Dan Pine.
Good evening, Chair Van Leer, school board members, Superintendent Nielsen. Tonight we will be giving you our monthly financial update. We'll talk a little bit about how enrollment's going and some of our expenditure trends and some history of our fund balance. Yeah, I could start, there's one story I could tell you about budgets. So this married couple was having really bad financial issues. They were spending more than they were making, things like that. They were getting late notices in the mail. So they're having this big, long discussion / argument about finances, and finally the guy gets up and he says, you know what, grabs his coat, he goes, I'm just gonna go down to the pub. And she goes off and says, what are you doing? We can't afford that. We just talked about how we have to save money. You can't be going to the pub. He goes, you're right. You should grab your coat. He goes, really? I get to go with? I never get to go with. That's fantastic. He goes, no, I'm going to turn the heat off. Anyway, so our presentation tonight, we'll talk about our financial update. We'll talk about our principles of finance. And a lot of this, I know we preach this a lot, but we like to use repetition. The principles that we follow in our finance department are integrity. That's followed through by audits. We're going through an audit right now. It's almost done. It shows that we have a fair representation of our financial standing. On the ethical side, we follow the letter of the law. Conservatism, we forecast the worst and expect that forecast to happen. You see that a lot as we talk about enrollment. Security, we safeguard all our assets through many different programs, our internal programs and external programs like insurance. And we rely on mission-driven expenditures, meaning that all our expenditures serve a public purpose. If you look at the budget we're in right now, I just want to point out how our revenues look. And as you can see, that state aid makes up about 70% of our revenues. State aid mainly comes in the form of the basic formula multiplied by the number of students you have, or the weighted average daily membership. It also, there's a big chunk that comes in the form of special education aid. Obviously still not enough, as we run about a $20 million cross subsidy, meaning that we spend about $20 million in special ed more than we bring in. But I want to point out that the state aid is now 70% of our revenues in our general fund, and local taxes are 26. That has been trending down, the state aid portion. That, you know, a couple of years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was up to 70. It was 75%, and the local taxes were less. The reason that's changed a lot is because the voters in this district had approved larger operating levies, of which the district is forever grateful. And also those operating levies are now tied to inflation, whereas state aid has only gone up at the most 2% every year for the last 12 years or so, since it was frozen back in, actually about 14 years, it was frozen back in 2008. We also get about 3% in federal aids. For the size of our district, it's not a lot. And then local fees, combination of admission fees, fees for students, things like that, adds up to about $3 million. If we look at our revenue, as we talked, we always want to just talk about how the budget enrollment goes, and we did receive a new report from the state today on enrollment for last year, which is very important as we do the audit. And as we can see in 2022, we had enrollment of ADM enrollment of 18,558, which is an increase of about 56 over the year before. And we're projecting for 2023 about 18,691. You can see a small steady increase in our budgeted enrollment. As we look at our current enrollment, we've got to kind of look at the implications. As we look at the number of students of 18,617, now that doesn't include adjustments made for early childhood special ed and for PSEO. In the slide before, this includes our adjustments made. But as we look at the number of students that, when I did this on Thursday, it was 18,617. And you can see that 8,330 of them are in elementary school, and we're running at about 83.8% capacity. At the middle school, we're at 4,157, and that's about 91% capacity. And then our total high school is 6,130, and that's actually 104% of capacity, so it's over capacity in the high schools. These are combined numbers. As we look at, if we drill it down a little bit, we can tell you that Gray Cloud and Pine Hill elementary schools are over 100% of capacity, so they're over capacity already. Bailey, Red Rock, and Valley Crossing elementary schools are over 95% of capacity. But we also have 5 elementary schools that have over 30% open seats. So you can see why in total we're looking okay, but we have these hot spots in these other schools. On the middle school side, Altman and Lake Middle Schools are at 96% utilization, 96% capacity. So they're pushing it. And then of course at the high schools right now, East Ridge is 118%, obviously way over capacity. Woodbury High School is 103%. A little bit over capacity, and Park High School is at 94%, which is pushing capacity. As we went through the audit and have most of the stuff cleaned up, there's a few entries to be made yet. I was able to get a chance to look at our expenditures. So we look at them by object code. And the object code is the use of them. For instance, salaries, benefits, supplies, capital, and other uses. And what I like to do is look at what's happened in the last 4 years with our expenses, how much they've increased or decreased in some instances, and what the average is per year. And we use a lot of that for our forecasting and for our future budgets. So our salaries, they've increased about 3.4% a year over the last 4 years. Our benefits have increased about 5% over the last 4 years a year. Services and supplies have been kept low. I mean, supplies have been kept low. We kept that, actually decreased a little bit over the last 4 years. Services have gone up about 13% a year over the last 4 years, about 52%. A lot of that has to do with some of the shifting to using teachers on call for subbing. So those expenses went from the salary side to the service side because we pay a service for our substitute teachers. Capital, we've kept that pretty even over the years. Then the other expenses, I think about 6% a year. So overall, our expenses have increased about 18% over the last 4 years, or about 4.49% a year. We use that a lot to forecast for the future, what's happened in the past, obviously. And on here, I also put a little note here about how the enrollment has gone over those years. Now, obviously, as we went through COVID, we saw a dip in our enrollment. And this one, I think it changed for this morning, but looking at the newest enrollment's increased about less than 1% over the last 4 years, about 0.2%. And our per pupil spending's increased about 4% over that time period. So the point of that is that the gross expenditures are increasing, but also our enrollment's increasing also. Then we also look at our expenditures by program area. So the object area is the why you're spending it. And the program area is the where you're spending it. And you can pretty much see the different programs, the increases over the years, and really administration, about 3% a year. District support, about 2.3. Regular instruction, about 2.3. Special ed instruction, almost 8% a year. Instructional support, about 4%, and then pupil support, 7.4% a year, and we'll go over some of these trends. As we look at our dollar, where the money is spent, 42 cents of every dollar is spent on classroom instruction, regular classroom instruction, and another 20 cents of every dollar is spent on special education. Spend about 12 cents of every dollar on facility costs. About 11 cents on student support, which includes transportation. District support about 6 cents, and that's your the support staff that you need to human resources, finance, payroll, student information, technology. Instructional support about 5 cents of every dollar, and then administration 3 cents of every dollar. Some of the trends I've been noticing, district expenses have risen about $42.3 million, or about 18%, average of 4.5. Special education costs have increased $13.6 million, or about an average of 7.3. The child count in special ed was in 17-18 was 2,910, and the most recent count for 21-22 is about 3,381. So that alone is an increase of 16%. And then we've also had an increase in pupil support, mainly in the area of special education transportation. So what is a fund balance? We normally deal with the unassigned amount, as that's the amount that the state uses to judge whether a district's in statutory operating debt. So our fund balance is similar to a family emergency account. We have a fund balance to manage risk and to respond to unforeseen circumstances without having to borrow money. Risk is assessed to determine how large the fund balance should be, and the more risk a school district faces, the larger its fund balance should be. We like to have our fund balance to be, our goal would be to get 2 months worth of expenditures in reserve. Some examples of risks that we face: bond ratings. To lower your fund balance, it will lower your bond rating, or lower your bond rating, making that when you borrow money, you're going to have to pay more in interest. The state aid lagging behind inflation, as we see inflation at pretty high levels right now. As we watch it month to month, and we're looking at 5 to 7%, 7 to 9%. It'll be interesting to see what kind of aid they're looking at. If they stay with the original, what they always do every year of 2% a year, there's no way that can keep up with inflation. state aid funding shifts happen every now and then, where they'll shift the dollars to us to another year, putting us about a year behind. Sometimes we have to resort to short-term cash borrowing for that. Federal funding reductions, oftentimes the federal funds are sequestered, meaning that they'll set them at just one level. You might be entitled to 100% of something, but they might sequester it down to 80%. Contract settlements. We have many unions that we negotiate with and many different ways of looking at contracts. And every time we settle something, we have a cost ensuing. Uncertain utility and service costs. I think everybody can understand that one as you see your bills at home go up. Just multiply that by many millions on our bills. And then if we have some major HVAC breakdowns, we try to plan our heating and ventilating equipment to get replaced in a timely manner, but if something happens in the middle of our plan, we'll need the cash to buy things like a new chiller or new boiler. So as we look at our unassigned fund balance, and I have 4 years here, 4 years of history, and then what's projected for the next year. Right now, as we looked at the audit and put the monies in reserve in the various places, we're looking at the end of FY 21-22, and that's not for sure yet because we're waiting for the audit to get done, but about a net change in the positive, about 5.3 million. Projecting our fund balance, unassigned fund balance of about $20 million, or about 8.7% of our expenditures. Next year's budget, which you approved in June, shows a net change of 1.3 million to the good, and that will result in a fund balance of about 21.4 million, or about 9%. Just a chart to show you the history of our fund balance. So this is just, we're just looking back. I don't have the future fund balances on this chart, but just to show that where we came from as recently as 16-17, when we were under $5 million in unassigned fund balance. And as we made adjustments over the years, both budget adjustments, increases in revenue with new operating levies and the such, and different ways of looking at budgeting, we see an upward trend of which we're grateful for, and hopefully we'll be trending up to 16%. With that, that's your update for the month, and I'll obviously take any questions.
Anyone have questions?
Hey, Dan. When you talk about the inflation on our levy, who determines the inflation multiplier for local aid?
Well, it's determined by the current CPI, but it's calculated by the Department of Education. So,
Do they take a snapshot in time, or do they look at, like if it's 8% one month and it's 7% one month and it's, or do they sort of average it out over the cost over the year, or how does that work?
they'll take the average of the 12 months, what actually happened. For the purpose of funding, what they'll do is they'll publish stuff for us to see what they're going to use for the next year, but they always balance it back out to what actually happened. So I'll get a report saying, oh, we're going to factor in 7%. And that's how they place the levies. But if something happens where it's lower than that, they'll go back and adjust that. Then they'll adjust our levies down the next time. But I haven't really seen them go down. They're pretty conservative in what their forecasts are. But they take, I believe, the actual for 12 months.
And so if they're doing an estimate and then it turns out to be higher, does that get applied as well for the following year?
Yeah, because it's statutory how they calculate it, so they have to do it that way. But they like to, when you levy, you're always levying ahead of time. So we'll levy. What we levy just now doesn't hit our books for another year afterwards. So they have to put dollars in there for the reports, but they have to wait until the real numbers come in. So they do adjustments up and down. Usually the adjustments aren't too drastic. Most everything that's levied is adjusted the next year. There's just pages and pages of adjustments for different things. Mostly, student counts too. We'll give them projections of our student counts. Then we'll levy certain things based on that. And then once the actual numbers come in, then they'll adjust them all back.
And is next year the year that the legislature is doing their big 2-year budget?
Yes, it'll be a funding year next year.
Okay. And in the
'Cause
past,
our formula right now is set for this fiscal year. We don't know what the formula is for next fiscal year.
in the past, have they made, well, I guess I don't really know when the last big inflationary period was, but have they made adjustments to reflect that since they're the bulk of funding for school districts in the state?
Not that I've seen the last 20 years as I look back. I don't know if we had multi-high inflation like we do right now. We were in the recession between like 2007 and 2009. They froze the formula so there was no increase because they were feeling the same effects on the cash side for them also. They're also going in this year with $8 billion debt surplus, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. And most of the talk was to work on the special ed cross subsidy, but I'm not sure how they'll do it. I mean, anytime they figure out some kind of formula that they put into law, they have to look at the tails on it because it's going to last for the biennium and longer. Whereas if they have one-time money, there's no tails on that. So I have no idea what they're going to do, but it'll be interesting.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm going to try to ask this in a succinct manner. Let's hope this works. In regards to special education, so, and I'm not a math person, but it appears as if special education, although a relatively small percentage of students on the whole, is half of what standard instruction is. Is that correct, or am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, the special education is about 52 million. Standard instruction is 116, so not quite half.
Okay,
yeah.
so not quite half. And it, just based on these numbers, it says that per pupil spending is 14,871, or that's the revised budget, that's per pupil. Does that include, is that an average across the board for?
Yes, that includes special ed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have an idea about what the per pupil spending is for special education students alone?
I don't want to do it in my head, but it's the 56 million divided by
However many
3,400 students. But that was straight special ed spending. Every special ed student also brings in basic formula money too. So sometimes you got to factor that in too.
Okay.
So that spending is also buffered by the fact that those 3,000 kids, we'll say, are bringing in 3,000, $30 million in aid also.
Right.
Whether they're in the regular classroom or not. I don't know if that answered anything, but I always I want people to remember that too.
That helps. I'm just trying to get a better understanding of the budget implications.
Yeah, it usually works out to about $20,000 per student for special ed, somewhere around there.
And maybe you don't know this offhand, but is that cost going up faster than to educate, I guess, or to provide a standard education?
Yeah, it really depends on the makeup of the students in special ed as far as the speed in which it's going up. It appears to be going up more quickly than the regular instruction. And that's mainly based on, services that are being provided to those students. So we do have more students classified in the special education category, but you'd have to really do a deep dive on this, we'll say the severity of of the disability to see, you know, a faster increase. And then if you look at, you know, sometimes tuition costs and how many students go to 916, which is a little more expensive and things like that. But I would say it's a safe bet that special education expenses are increasing more quickly than the regular instruction.
Okay. Appreciate that, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Dan.
You're welcome, thanks.
Next, we have 6.2, and that is a summary of our superintendent's evaluation, which I will share with you this evening. Last session, on October 6th, 2022, the South Washington County School Board entered into a closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, Subdivision 3, to perform Superintendent Julie Nielsen's yearly evaluation. In the overview, we discussed 7 performance standards: leadership accountability, policy governance, communities and communication, values, planning and development, human resource relationships, and financial and organizational management. Board members and cabinet members commented that we appreciate that Superintendent Nielsen is someone who maintains a positive presence in the district and that she promptly identifies issues and concerns to find workable solutions. We appreciate the communications and the relationship that she is building by being proactive in making ethical decisions. She is student-centered, ensuring all students have the necessary resources and tools to succeed. During the pandemic, which was a difficult way to start a school year, but given what we were dealt with as far as the pandemic and the difficulty that it put us all in, she handled the situation well. There were a couple of things that we discussed that would be next steps to focus on. We felt there was a need to focus on staffing shortages, working on our strategic plan, community-friendly finance language, and a friendlier website navigation system. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the board and the cabinet members for their thoughtfulness and feedback for the superintendent's evaluation. The overall evaluation was very positive from the direct report as well as the board. Superintendent Nielsen, we thank you for your leadership, your vision, your positive attitude, and your commitment to the community and the district. The board very much appreciates your leadership. Moving along, we have 7.0, which is an action item. 7.1, our proposed policy changes presented this evening by our superintendent, Julie Nielsen.
Good evening. Thank you again. This evening, I am bringing forth 6 policies. If you recall from the last meeting, we did remove 1 policy. So I am bringing forward Policy 509, Enrollment of Non-Resident Students, also known as our open enrollment. 801, Equal Access to School Facilities for Students. For that policy, there were no suggested changes. 801.4, Conducting Bond Campaigns. Again, no suggested changes. 806.3, Insurance Recovery and Replacement. No changes being recommended. 806.4, Parking, Traffic, and Safety Controls on District Property. Just minor changes in the approval underneath 2M. And then 807, Health and Safety, we removed the procedural component and will create a separate procedure document. So this evening, I am asking for approval on those policies.
Thank you. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Simi, second by Katie. Is there any discussion or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank
Julie.
you.
Next is 7.2, resolution for open enrollment, and that presentation will be given this evening by Dr. Tyrone Brookins and Christine Schaefer.
Good evening, School Board Chair Van Leer, School Board members, and Superintendent Nielsen.
We are here tonight to request approval of a resolution related to open enrollment of students from outside our school district boundaries, and also adopting standards for accepting and rejecting open enrolled applications. As you recall, at our last school board meeting on October 6th, Assistant Superintendent Kelly Jansen reviewed the policy and procedure for open enrollment in our district. At that time, Kelly went into details related to open enrollment and referenced the resolution that we're bringing forward today. Tonight, we'll review the resolution and the schools we are recommending be closed to open enrollment. If you take a look at the resolution in your packet, you will see that it begins with referencing Minnesota Statute 124D.03, Enrollment Options Program. This statute outlines information related to school boards adopting specific standards for acceptance or rejection of open enrollment applications. Also in that statute, it references the parameters in which school boards may reject applications for open enrollment based on the number of students in a particular grade level. Those parameters include the number of non-resident students who seek to enroll at any grade level under the Enrollment Options Act may not exceed the lesser of 1% of the total enrollment at that grade level in our district, or the number of District 833 residents at that grade level who are enrolled in a non-resident district under the Enrollment Options Act. So for example, if 1% of our first grade students across the district is 15, and we look at the number of first grade students enrolled in other districts outside our district, if that number is lower, we'd use the lower number. So we use 15. So if we have, for example, if there are only 7 students in first grade enrolled in other districts, we'd use 7 or 1%. And we are required to take 1% of open enrolled kids in our district. Is that clear? All right. All right, so now I'll have Assistant Superintendent Brookins review suggested parameters to open enrollment.
Thank you, Christine. The resolution next references the additional parameters for denying an application for open enrollment, and that is if a program, class, or school building capacity has been reached. In the next 2 paragraphs of the resolution, it is referencing capacity and how we would determine if the school has reached capacity. We would include the following 3 items. Determination number 1, the utilization of additional physical space for the program, class, or school building to function properly, provided that the additional space is not readily available. Determination number 2, the addition of a staff member to adequately address the needs of the students in that program, class, or building. Or determination number 3, a material change to the program, class, or school building that would adversely affect the quality of the education provided in that program, class, or school building. Additional information related to whether capacity of a school building has been reached could also include the staff to student ratios, the current or projected enrollment, the current or projected staffing, the size and other physical attributes of the facility, recommendations from the Minnesota Department of Health or the Minnesota Department of Education or the Center for Disease Control, any applicable social distancing requirements, and other factors that affect the quality of education. And using the parameters I just mentioned, you will see on page 2 of the resolution, each of the schools in our district and their current maximum capacity for student enrollment. Currently, our recommendation is that when an elementary school reaches 90% of their capacity, they shall be closed to open enrollment. And when secondary, that's middle or high schools, they reach 95% of their capacity, they shall be closed to open enrollment. And using these parameters, we are recommending that the following schools are closed to open enrollment for the 23-24 school year. And those schools are Bailey Elementary, Gray Cloud Elementary, Pine Hill Elementary, Red Rock Elementary, Valley Crossing Elementary, Cottage Grove Middle School, Lake Middle School, Oatman Middle School, Woodbury Middle School, East Ridge High School, Park High School, and Woodbury High School. At this time, we would like to request the approval of the resolution.
Thank you, Tyrone. Christine, can I have a motion to approve the resolution?
Second.
This is there any discussion? Comments? This is a resolution, so we will need a roll call vote. Dana?
Eric Jessmer,
Yes.
Louise Hines,
Yes.
Katie Schwartz, Melinda Doles,
Yes.
Simi Petniak,
Yes.
Pat Driscoll is absent, Sharon Van Leer,
Yes. Motion carried.
All right, before you go forward, we want to remind parents and community members that applications for open enrollment are accepted from December 1st through January 15th, 4 p.m. on the 15th. Any applications received after January 15th will receive the next number on the waiting list, and decisions will be mailed out by February 15th.
Thank you. Now we have 7.3, resolution of the Minnesota State High School League membership grant. That will be presented this evening by Assistant Superintendent Christine Schaefer.
All right, good evening again. Tonight I would like to seek approval of the resolution for application to the Minnesota State High School League Foundation. As you know, we are members of the State High School League. The High School League has a foundation whose goals are to promote growth of high school students and participation of extracurricular activities. These foundation grants are awarded to school districts to assist and promote extracurricular participation by high school students in athletics and fine arts. The State High School League offers grants for school districts to apply for to support and promote our activities to underserved populations. Our school district has applied for this grant in previous years, and we've received it each year. Schools receive funds based on the number of students participating in the State High School League activities that qualify for free and reduced lunch. We use the grant money with our underserved populations. In talking with our activities directors, they said they've used these funds in the past to buy equipment, uniforms, and pay fees for students in need. One example is one of our boys basketball teams has 50% students that qualify for free reduced lunch, and so they use grant money for extra buses or supplies for that boys basketball program. So at this time, I'd like to seek approval of the resolution to request the funds from the Minnesota State High School League again this year from that grant.
Thank you, Christine. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved. Second.
It was motioned by Katie and second by Louise. Is there any discussion or comments? Seeing none, this is a resolution. Dana, roll call.
Louise Hines,
Yes.
Katie Schwartz, Melinda Doles,
Yes.
Simi Petnaik,
Yes.
Pat Driscoll is absent, Eric Tesmer,
Yes.
Sharon Van Leer.
Yes. Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on, we have the next agenda item is 7.4, leasing extensions with the City of Woodbury, presented this evening by Finance and Operations Director Dan Pine.
Good evening again. We've been working with the City of Woodbury for many, many years. Central Park is a structure that is in the middle of the City of Woodbury, joined with a joint venture of City of Woodbury and Washington County. We've been leasing space in Central Park for the past 20 years for use as instructional space. And there are many different programs in there, ranging from special education to adult basic ed, and now the new online school. That lease ran out this year. And in lieu of the fact that the City of Woodbury is looking at remodeling the space, the plans have not been approved for construction of that space yet by the City of Woodbury. We found it prudent to just amend the lease for one more year, so there'll be no increase in rent. And we will have our lease run for one more year. And that's the purpose of this attachment, is to approve this amendment to the lease so that we can stay in there for one more year, and then we will see what we will negotiate next summer as we see what the new space looks like. With that, I would ask for approval of the amendment of the lease.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the lease extension?
Second.
Moved by Louise, second by Eric. Is there any discussion?
Hey, Dan, I had a question. So this would be, so by extending it for 1 year, is it like the equivalent of like an apartment going month to month? Like where you just extend it, like, and then each year we would have to make this decision unless we enter into a
Yeah.
longer?
Yeah, I think yes, it would be the equivalent of just extending the lease for another year.
And so what is the, are they going to have, is the city going to have more, when is the city's plans going to be complete for what the space, the new Central Park will look like, or the renovated Central Park would look like?
Well, I would think Bob Lawrence, who serves as our representative on that committee, would have probably a better answer, but we're anticipating that they will have their plans approved in the next couple months, and then commit to construction. I don't know how soon the construction will be done, but we'll have a better idea what it all looks like. And we'll bring that back to you once we see the new plans. At this point, the way it's been progressing, the city representative and I just felt it was probably the best thing to do is extend for one more year, know that we're in there for another year. We can run the same exact programs for another year, and then we'll kind of gauge it in the spring and see what's going on.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Next is 7.5, and that's the MOU with the City of Woodbury concerning Central Park. And that will be presented by, again, by Dan Pine.
Good evening again. Chair Van Leer, members of the school board, Superintendent Nielsen. You may recall that we did a memorandum of understanding with the city of Cottage Grove before their election, as they were looking to construct a new community center with the dome and all that. And they had asked before the election if we could have an agreement with the school district, you know, that we would commit to using it, basically. This is very similar. As Central Park is renovated, as more space is added, before they go all out on it, they would like to have a MOU with us, with the district, to commit to saying, yes, we will continue to utilize that space. We'll continue to rent that space once it's done. It just helps them in their financing and things like that. That the MOU is not binding us to a lease. It's terminated if the city decides not to do anything with Central Park. Leaves it the same, then we'll have to make a decision once again, because we do need the space. We're excited that the space will be renovated, that there may be additional professional development space. Well, I would say meeting space that we could utilize as professional development. We'll work all that into the new lease. But tonight they're asking that you go into a memorandum of understanding that we would commit to utilizing that space, as we did with the city of Cottage Grove. Now that went moot when the election failed, so that memorandum of understanding was terminated. This would be the same thing, only they won't go through an election, but if they decide, you know what, we just can't get this figured out, we're not going to do it, we're just going to leave the space as it is, then this would be terminated also. So we're recommending the approval of the attached memorandum of understanding with the city of Woodbury.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Melinda and second by Simi. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, Dan, can I ask, in the previous, when we approved the bond to go on the ballot, part of that was looking at reducing our lease levy obligations. And so by signing this memorandum of understanding, are we committing ourselves to anything with respect to our long-term facilities planning?
We anticipate that this need for the space will remain. It is our central location in Woodbury for adult basic ed in our online school. So as we did our long-range facility planning, we had planned on utilizing Central Park. The reduction in lease levy was mainly with the transition programs, where we keep Next Step program, and we have the Pathways program in 2 separate buildings. So in the plan, we always had planned on maintaining Central Park.
Do we have something with this information? Because it's not, I don't see it online, and,
It was emailed to us.
The actual MOU, or
yeah.
Dana, did it get
I wonder if
attached?
my email didn't update.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not attached. Okay.
On Monday, the amended agenda. Amended agenda tomorrow.
Oh, you couldn't
Right,
attach
so
it?
it's not online.
I'm sorry about
Katie
that.
has a copy now.
Do you? Oh, okay. The rent on in the MOU? Yeah, that's not been negotiated yet, but we were paying, quite frankly, we were paying only about $10 per square foot for the last 20 years. And this is estimated at 25, but that will certainly be negotiated between City of Woodbury and myself. We're also going to negotiate uses of public spaces, guarantees and things like that. But yeah, it's kind of bringing up to market. What really happened was when they built it in 2002, our portion, they basically just charged us what the construction cost was. And, I don't know what their business plan is, but that's what we were paying. So if you figure out right now, we're paying $94,000 for 9,300 square feet. It's not much over $10 square foot. We will look at the market and negotiate a decent market rate, because it's between public entities, the city and the school district. It's not like, they're there to make money, but he was estimating that at that point, the market would be $25. But yes, it would be an increase, but we've been getting it pretty reasonable for a long time, too.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Katie? Harry? Okay. Okay, do you have something you want to say? Did you say one? Nope. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Dan. 8.0 is our superintendent's report, and that will be given by Julie Nielsen.
Thank you. It is hard to believe that we are backing up to the Education Minnesota. Thursday and Friday, we will have no students. It continues to be a busy time in our schools. Last night, I felt like it was the perfect storm at Eastridge. Upon entering, there was the Masterworks concert going on, so all three of our high schools had choir groups performing, which was absolutely incredible. And I encourage anyone in the community, if you are looking for a night out, whether that be an athletic event, a musical, our plays will be coming up, just fabulous opportunities. But really what caught my eye was the cheerleading group there. I was amazed at all the stunts they could do and how I couldn't even try one of those things. But in saying that, last night at Eastridge High School, we had our first community session upstairs in the media center, and we had about 40 individuals attend. We are asking that individuals RSVP for a couple of reasons. We want to make sure that we can keep the groups small enough and that we have technology prepared, as well as a result of the listening sessions, that we're able to send out everybody who attends the list of what was generated. Dana has been great about sending the information out in advance, as well as following up with everybody that RSVPs. That is the purpose of the RSVP. We want to make sure that this is the opportunity to listen, to respond to 4 questions, and all of that information will be online. Last night's community session is already uploaded, SoWashCo.org/facility planning, and all the community feedback is in there for that session. When individuals go on the website, you will also see that our schools, the staff within our schools, as well as PTOs or PTAs, are also doing it. You will see there will be legislative sessions added, so there will be a lot of feedback that we will use that information that we're hearing as we begin to think about that survey that we talked about with Peter Leatherman, to say what are some of the big themes that we see and how might we tap into that as we move forward with a survey out to our community. So any information around our community sessions is out online, and people are still welcome to RSVP. When they attend, we just do a quick check-in. They have a name tag. And as we said, these sessions are facilitated externally. I did a quick welcome, and then I left and went to the Masterwork concert. So we encourage anyone within the community, staff members, to please plan to attend a listening session. And that is, we are listening to what our community is saying. This is not a Q&A at all. I talked a little bit about Education Minnesota being Thursday and Friday. Transportation, we continue to struggle like other districts with bus driver shortages. Last week, we had to cancel a route or two again. And so I think I shared with the board, but I also want to share with the community that we are looking at what are our options moving forward. Because we're going to have to perhaps have a mid-year solution that gets us to the end of the year and moving forward. Because right now we are just barely hanging on. When we have everyone in the office and our mechanics out driving buses, it really puts us in risks in other areas when it comes to student safety. And finally, as I conclude, tonight is our Director of Communications last board meeting. You can see him sitting back there, and he's real sad that he's not going to have to come to board meetings in the evening. But just to say a couple of words, Pepe has been an incredible asset to our team. I don't know that he always realizes what he brought, but just what he brought to our team, our new branding, and just the focus on having our student voice included. And we look back at some of our presentations. Actually, Dan came into me one day and tossed one of the old PowerPoints down on the table from 2014, and he said, "Look at this." And certainly our branding is a highlight. Getting us through the pandemic with just very level-headedness, no crisis. Everything was done very methodically and with perfection. Pepe and his team helped to implement a program called Situation Reports, which allows quick communication in crisis from our schools, from our departments to central office and those individuals that need to know. He has been responsible for a lot of the management of large projects, from our operating levy to our bond to our budgeting. We have grown in our communications area in the area of translation and making sure that we're accommodating and meeting students and families' needs. And to be honest, I know one of my goals is just the navigation of the website, but when you think about migrating an entire website over to a new platform, that was something really huge to do in the middle of a pandemic. And so we are going to miss his expertise, his project management, and his sense of humor. So thank you, Pepe, for everything you've done for South Washington County Schools. We wish you the best of luck in California.
Bye-bye, my son. 9.0 are our future meeting dates. We have a school board meeting workshop meeting on November 3rd, 2022, and a business meeting on November 17th, 2022. Both are at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. Next, we have 10.0, a closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03 for labor negotiations. Please note that after the closed session, there will be no action. We will resume to the public meeting, then adjourn the meeting. Can I get a motion to move to a closed session?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Simi, seconded by Louise. Is there any comments, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Resume. Here we go.
We all do look like we color coordinate.
We have returned from closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03 for labor negotiations. Can I get a motion to approve the return to the open meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Simi, second by Eric. Is there any discussion, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. With that, we are at 11.0 and we are adjourned.